I'm going to do something kind of risky in this video. I'm going to talk about probably the most controversial macronutrient in the food world. I'm going to put my head right into the mouth of the lion, step into the belly of the beast, and hopefully not bite off more than I can chew, because today we are going to talk about that hottest of topics, protein. We're going to start with some basic facts, things that everybody agrees on. And then once that's established, we'll delve into some of the points that people don't necessarily see eye to eye on, and we'll just see how it goes from there. Proteins are the basic building blocks of life. They are what provides structure to your cells, and they are key in every function of every cell. Now, notwithstanding all the exotic bacteria we talked about before, you are made mostly of protein, and when it comes down to it, so are all those exotic bacteria we talked about. Proteins are among the most complex compounds on Earth, and there are gobs and gobs of different kinds. Now, I promise to not get too deep into the chemistry stuff today, but what you do need to know is that the basic building blocks of proteins are amino acids, which you probably have heard of. Now, there are hundreds of different amino acids in nature, but the human body only needs 20 or 22 of them, depending on who you ask. We'll just go with 20 for now. We get them from our food, but we don't have to actually eat all of them directly. Our bodies have the ability to make 11 of those amino acids from carbs and fat, so we don't have to eat them directly. Okay, so that takes care of the first 11, so what about the other 9? Well, that's where the arguments start to break out. You see, everybody does agree that there are 9 amino acids that the body cannot make, so we have to eat those directly from our food. And since we have to eat those other 9 aminos, they are considered essential to our diet, and that's why you've probably heard them called the essential amino acids or essential aminos. And not that you asked, but those 9 essential aminos are histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. Now, I know that's like impossible to remember, so I made up a little song for it. It goes like this. Histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, valine. No, I didn't say it was catchy. So if we have to get those from our food, then what do we need to eat to make sure we get them all? Now, the easiest way to get all of them is to eat foods that contain all 9. And as you likely know, the most popular and well-known source of all 9 aminos is animal protein. Fish, pork, red meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, and I don't know what else, maybe caviar, but who can afford that? Now, what you may not already know is that there are a few plant foods that contain all 9 essential aminos. It's hemp seeds, tempeh, tofu, edamame, chia, nutritional yeast, amaranth, sprouted grain bread, spirulina, and of course, my old buddy, quinoa. Now, if you want to be super pedantic, I suppose you could point out that nutritional yeast and spirulina are not technically plants, but for now, let's just assume that you are not super pedantic, so just shut up. Now, just in case you do want to know, nutritional yeast is a fungus and spirulina is a bacteria, but we're not talking about that, right? So yeah, just shut up. Okay, so there are some simple combinations of plant-based foods that when eaten together also provide all 9 essential aminos, like rice and beans, peanut butter and bread, pita and hummus, barley and lentils, to name a few, and that's what people are talking about when they say a complete protein. A complete protein is a food or combination of foods that provides all 9 essential aminos. But here's where the misinformation starts to seep in. What most people don't seem to know is that all vegetables do actually contain all the essential aminos. It's just that they contain them in such low quantities that they don't actually provide you with what you need to be healthy and to thrive. If you were to just eat broccoli, for example, you wouldn't get enough leucine, isoleucine, and methionine. It has trace amounts of those things, but just not enough to keep you healthy. Now, if you were to eat just broccoli, then the conventional wisdom is that you still need to find some foods that are high in those things, like nuts, seeds, and whole grains, or you could just do it the easy way and eat complete proteins like quinoa and tofu. Now, of course, nobody eats just broccoli, and I'm definitely not suggesting that you do. I was just trying to illustrate a point. And so, again, yeah, oh my God, just stop. But yet again, another but. A lot of nutritionists and vegan advocates are now saying that you don't actually have to do that. The new thinking is that if you just eat a wide variety of plant foods, you'll get all the aminos you need. Now, I'm not taking a side on that because I'm not a vegan. I do believe the advice, though, that everybody, vegan or not, should be eating at least 30 different plants per week. And it's a lot easier than it sounds. My morning smoothie alone gets me up to 12. Seeded bread usually has another 10 or so. The kimchi recipe I showed you has another 6. My nut butter recipe has another 4. So just those things alone gets you up to 32. I mean, easy. So if you do decide to try vegan, the one mistake I implore you to not make is to become what I call a French fry vegetarian. There are plenty of nutritionally impoverished plant-based foods out there. If you just eat French fries, white bread, and chips, you will not thrive. Health food stores are chock full of processed junk. Organic plant-based junk is still junk. And no matter what type of diet you choose, you will always need to eat quality foods, and you should eat a wide variety of quality foods. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying, a lot of the experts in the vegan space are now saying that if you just eat a wide variety of plants, you don't have to obsess with matching your foods to create a complete protein. Interesting. I think if I were to go vegan, I would probably still closely track what I was eating, at least at first. Now, maybe it all becomes instinctual after a while, but I would still probably load up on quinoa, chia, and hemp seed, which would be so easy for me because I already load up on those things anyway, just because they're yummy and healthy and nutritious, so easy. So everyone agrees that protein is super important. Everyone agrees that animal protein has all 9 essential aminos. Everyone agrees that some plant-based foods and combination of plants can also provide all 9 essential aminos, and that much we all agree on, but that's about all. Some people go so far as to say that you don't even really need to be careful to take the time to make sure you're getting all of your aminos. Their position is that you have to eat a lot of different plants and it will take care of itself. It's also worth noting that there are vegans out there who are professional athletes and even bodybuilders, so obviously plants can indeed give you everything you need to put on muscle and even to be a world-class quarterback. Other well-known vegans of large stature include horses and elephants and brontosauruses. Now, speaking of dinosaurs, I have to interject that for a very long time, people in the Western world sort of overemphasized the importance of protein, up to and including the notion that protein was the only truly important macronutrient. I think we still have some vestiges of that thinking in our current conversations. A lot of hunger relief organizations still talk about grams of protein per person when estimating need. Now, most nutritionists now agree that to be really healthy, we need a balance of all the macronutrients, but sometimes those vestigial paradigms can linger even into what may present as a new way of thinking. There are people, really smart people, who firmly still believe that protein is the only nutrient we really need, and some of those people present that as new cutting-edge science. Now, my own mother spent her whole life working with a well-known relief organization who has saved countless children from starvation, so serving the needs of the hungry was a prominent feature of my childhood. It's just that I have to respectfully hold the opinion that we're healthiest if we're lucky enough to include fat and carbohydrate in our diet as well. The other thing that people love to argue about is how much. How much protein do we need? Is it the same for everybody regardless of goals, age, gender, and activity, or do we need to customize our protein intake for those variables? Now again, I'll start with what we do know. The body does not have a storage system for protein. We can store carbohydrate in the liver and muscles in the form of glycogen. Once we run out of room to store glycogen, it gets turned into fat, which gets stored in various places in the body. So we have ways of storing carbs and fat, not all of which are healthy, but they do exist. Excess protein, on the other hand, doesn't have a storage system. We do have a pathway for converting protein into energy, but we can only use so much. And once the body uses as much protein as it can, some of the excess comes out when we go to the bathroom, and some of it ends up getting converted into fat. So the bottom line is that it is possible to eat more protein than your body can use. And that's what most nutritionists believe, though there are some outliers who disagree. Now, anecdotally, excess protein has been associated with increased incidence of kidney stones, cancer, weight gain, constipation, stress on the liver and kidneys, and a few other less serious but unfortunate side effects that could impede your social life. Now, note that I said anecdotally. To my knowledge, causal pathways for those things have not been established, but there does seem to be a consensus that yes, there is such a thing as too much protein. There was one study at Stanford headed by Christopher Gardner that I find useful. They fed their subjects varying amounts of protein and then measured everything that came out of their bodies. And by everything, I do mean everything. So use your imagination or don't. Just, don't. But all I can say is that it was in the interest of science. So, yeah. But what they found was that on average, anything much more than 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight just passed through for the most part. And that included those subjects who were doing strength training to put on muscle. And they found that it was very possible to put on significant muscle mass using that formula. Now, for a 150-pound human, that's about 30 grams per day. That's roughly a piece of meat about the size of a deck of playing cards or about 5 eggs. Now, there are a couple of caveats here. For one, that number was the result of something called an EAR, an estimated average requirement. And what that means mathematically is that for 49% of people, 0.8 grams will be insufficient, and for another 49%, it's too much. So the ironic thing about an average is that it can mean it's wrong for 98% of us. So think about that. Average is wrong for most people. Interesting. Well, another interesting thing that I have to mention is that there is a long list of scientists whom I deeply respect who strongly disagree with these numbers. I've seen some people recommend as much as 80 to 150 grams, which is 3 to 5 times more than what I just described, but most nutritionists are saying between 0.8 grams per kilo to 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. So for a 150-pound person, that's around 30 to 90 grams. So 1 to 3 servings, like I described. A lot of respectable nutritionists say that the older you are, the more protein you need. And some also say that you need more if you're trying to put on muscle mass, but at least as many say that to be healthy, you don't want to overdo it, and any more than 1 to 3 servings is more than your body can actually use. It's also widely accepted that most Americans get enough, if not too much protein, so it's very unlikely that you yourself have a protein deficiency. As for me, I usually have 1 to 3 servings of protein per day, and by most indicators, I seem to be pretty healthy, knock on wood. But now I have to recognize that there are a lot of people who recommend way, way more than anything I've described here. And by all means, make up your own mind, but I find those numbers a little suspect. Unless something really shakes up my paradigm, I'm going to keep eating roughly from 1 to 3 servings per day. And the last thing that people like to argue about in the protein world is the source. When it comes to source, the key word is bioavailability, which is a way to describe how well your body can absorb the protein. If it's very bioavailable, that means that it's easy for your body to absorb it. And this may surprise you, but there's some disagreement on that one too. Some say it's egg whites, while others say that egg whites are the worst way to get protein. A lot of people say whey, while others say no whey. Pea protein is another popular one. Bone broth gets a lot of press, and there are countless others. The way I see it, there are so many factors to consider when it comes to eating a healthy diet, and it's already potentially overwhelming enough. So I focus on eating things that I know are good for me. Maximizing optimal protein intake for me is just not as important to me as getting healthy fats, vitamins, fiber, polyphenols, and other phytochemicals. And I'm not a fan of ultra-processed foods of any kind, including scientific protein supplements. I prefer things that were made in a field or a pasture to things that were made in a laboratory. I want to cook with things that I know are good for me and have one item on their ingredient list. If I need a little extra protein, then I'm more likely to eat my own homemade bone stock or an extra serving of pasture-raised steak because I want to make the food that makes me. Making sure I get enough flavonoids serves my health way more than obsessing over protein. But still, I didn't create this channel to proselytize any one way of eating. I'm more interested in giving you information and having an interesting conversation, so I hope I've done that today. I hope you found something interesting or useful, and if not, I hope at least mildly entertaining in here, and if you did, then I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And of course, just like everyone else on YouTube, I'd love it if you could like and smash the buttons like a smash burger, because that's what nourishes the channel. But for now, it is time to wrap up this video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Ciao.